So that's the teacher? No, dude. That's Victor Boot, the previous massive Russian prisoner that we released for Brittany Griner when Brittany Griner was arrested for similar circumstances that this teacher was arrested for as well.
To breaking news overnight, an American teacher back on U.S. soil after being detained in Russia for more than 3 years. Mark Fogel was welcomed home last night by President Trump at the White House. And our chief global affairs correspondent, Martha Raddatz, has the latest for us. Good morning, Martha.
Good morning, Michael. This came as a complete surprise after weeks of secret negotiations by President Trump's billionaire friend and special envoy Steve Witkoff. Witkoff arriving in Moscow on his private jet to whisk Mark Fogel home to a reception by the president himself. This morning, American teacher Mark Fogel back on U.S. soil, kissing the ground, thankful to be home. With an American flag draped around his neck, the 63-year-old from Pennsylvania met by President Trump overnight at the White House.
We got him home, and he's healthy. He looks good, actually. To me, you look damn good, I'll tell you that.
I think when expectations are low.
The emotional homecoming years in the making.
I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now. And I said, never has one owed so much to so many.
Lost for words as he expressed his gratitude, thanking the president and members of his administration who helped bring him home.
I'm a middle-class school teacher who's now in a dream world.
Fogel recounting the deplorable conditions he suffered during his 3.5 years in Russian prisons.
There were times when it was extreme. There were times when I could manage it.
His 95-year-old mother, his most fervent advocate, reaching out to Trump during the campaign with a plea to bring her son home.
I had to get her back home because I would have had big trouble with his mother.
Fogel calling his mother Tuesday to tell her he had finally been released.
It just was such a shocker, and such a beautiful shocker. We just need to get him home and hug him and hold him.
The White House says Fogel was freed as part of what they call a very fair exchange with Russia, but would not give any details. Fogel was arrested in...
He took 17 grams of weed into Russia, was unlawfully detained. Yeah, I mean, it's fucking ridiculous, chat. What are you talking about? Okay, like, what do you mean? You think I'm gonna say like, oh yeah, this was perfectly valid for the Russian government to arrest them? Like, there are people that the Russian government captures that are obviously spies, like the passport enthusiast. Okay, like that dude's a spy. You got busted. That's the game. Okay, fair is fair. But when they do shit like this, if they catch like a dude with weed or whatever, and then decide like, oh, you're going to permanent jail, you're just captured as a political pawn. Okay, same with Brittany Griner.
In 2021, according to Russian authorities, this surveillance video shows Fogel at a Russian airport trying to enter the country for a teaching assignment, where his family says he was carrying a small amount of medically prescribed marijuana in his...
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Like, that is 100% ridiculous, okay? Especially because like, certain levels of weed is legal in Russia too, or... It's not legal, but like they literally just let you go. They write like a small fine or something. Like, it's just fucking bullshit. I remember looking into it. Back in the day with the Brittany Griner stuff. Like, it was bullshit back then too. Don't be like the goddamn Republicans who were like, oh, this is a ridiculous trade. Fuck Brittany Griner. She hates America, just because it's like some fucking random teacher who's a little bit of a pothead. A Russian national is not held to the same standards. This guy just got unlucky. Exactly. It's ridiculous.
His luggage, but Russia charging him as a large-scale drug smuggler, sentencing him to 14 years in a penal colony.
Do you think that's valid? Come on. Ridiculous, dude. Get out of here. It's completely ridiculous. It's 100% done so that Russia can have a upper hand in any kind of like hostage negotiation deal and any kind of like prisoner swap deal.
the State Department declaring Fogel wrongfully detained last October.
With the exception of Griner, I think most of these guys are spies for America, but we always come up with a crime they did. No, this guy isn't a spy, I don't think. There are instances where they do capture spies. Okay? And guess what? They don't have to fucking say, oh, we captured you because you had a weed vape in your bag. They will be like, oh, we captured you because you literally talked to a FSB guy with 8 passports in your pocket. And you had $50,000 of cash in your goddamn briefcase. That's how they catch those guys. And they will just straight up be like, well, that's a little weird, don't you think?
Tuesday, officials sharing this photo of Fogel's flight to freedom, the first image of him finally free. And this morning, the Russians revealing what the White House did not. They say a Russian now in a U.S. prison will be returned to Moscow in the coming days as part of the exchange for the release of Mark Fogel.
I feel like the luckiest man on earth right now.
Also, those prisoner swaps aren't public. No, the American government will still say that they're not a spy, even when they very clearly are a fucking spy. By the way, I don't know. I don't think this guy is, though. I think this guy is just like a dude who likes to smoke weed.
Thank you all. And I love our country. And I'm so happy to be back here.
Hard not to smile watching that. Mark Fogel offered his thanks to his country and his president after his release from a Russian prison yesterday, ending more than a 3-year ordeal in captivity. They're a nightmare for him. The American.
Yeah, first of all, if he was a spy, I doubt that he would be carrying weed with him. Okay? Like, why would you? I don't know. Like, I doubt that he would be coming in with cannabis in his pocket. Who the Russians got in exchange is a cyber criminal, right? Yeah. Breaking. Accused Russian money launderer. I love that liberals and Republicans basically swap places. Like, Democrats and Republicans swap places, and they'll also complain in the same exact way that the Republicans complain about Griner. Breaking. Accused Russian money launderer Alexander Vinnik is being released from U.S. custody in exchange for Mark Fogel, who was freed from a Russian prison yesterday. Vinnik is accused of operating a multi-billion-dollar cryptocurrency exchange that allegedly facilitated transactions for drug dealers and identity thieves. So this is how it works. Trump gets to play great deal maker, claiming he secured Fogel's release for nothing, only for the truth to come out the next day. Classic authoritarian tactics. Classic Trump. Okay, you can make the same about Brittany Griner for Victor Boot. You know what I mean? Victor Boot was a massive get for Russia. Victor Boot was an even bigger get for Russia. There was literally a section of the order dropping Adams' DOJ prosecution that complained about the Brittany Griner deal being given up for Boot. See, this doesn't work because Biden released one of the most insane arms dealers. Even here, the Democrats look like losers. Yeah, I mean, listen. The reason why we already nabbed Victor Boot to begin with was because he was eating away at the CIA market share. Okay? It's not like they got him. They worked with Victor Boot in the past. They literally popped him because he was selling weapons. It was market competition. It wasn't because they were like, oh, this guy's the Lord of War. That's just a story that you tell to justify the massive arrest that you did. That's it. The Lord of War, I know. I mean, it's a great movie. It's funny because in the United States of America, the Lord of War is not like a guy, okay? It's guys like the dude who actually left the State Department over Israel. Like, that is the real Lord of War. His job, remember that bald guy? The British bald guy who works for the State Department, who obviously understandably made a big stink about America's undying loyalty to Israel. Like, that's the real fucking Lord of War. He doesn't look cool like Victor Boot, but he's the real Lord of War. What do you think he was doing at the State Department? Sure, he was right about the Israel stuff, but like, what do you think his job was at the State Department? It was literally authorizing weapons deals. That was his job. Who do you think the real Lord of War is? The real Lord of War is some dildo with a fucking Yale degree that is a pencil pusher at the State Department. That is the real Lord of War. Okay? I don't want to shit on him too much because he's correct on Israel for probably different reasons than me, but but he's still correct on Israel.
Teacher was welcomed home late last night, a snowy Washington. The pictures are really amazing. He was arrested back in Moscow in 2021 for
the scene in the movie Kino. Anyway, is Elon going to uncover this stuff or just a $50 million for condoms? What do you mean, Elon? Is Elon going to uncover this stuff? So that's the teacher? No, dude. That's Victor Boot, the previous massive Russian prisoner that we released for Brittany Griner when Brittany Griner was arrested for similar circumstances that this teacher was arrested for as well.
Carrying 17 grams of a doctor-prescribed medical marijuana, and he was serving a 14...
Yeah, speaking of Elon Musk, someone's got to audit this guy. Hold on. It seems like there's a new State Department contract, $400 million for armored Teslas.
15-year sentence before yesterday. The U.S. said he was wrongfully held during that entire time. Fogel was brought home by billionaire real estate investor Steve Witkoff.
Bro, Steve Witkoff is everywhere, dude. Steve Witkoff, the GOAT. The great peacekeeper, dude. Holy shit. Bless him. The peacemaker himself.
Who is President Trump's special envoy to the Middle East. Witkoff joins us now first on CBS Mornings. Mr. Witkoff, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
And thank you for stepping out of the private sphere to take on such an important job in government. I want to stay in Washington for this first question because it was so amazing last night to have Fogel there, the American flag around his neck. He's got an Iron City beer in his hand. He looked, for all appearances, like he was in pretty good shape, but you spent time with him. What was his mood like, his demeanor? How healthy is he?
He was upbeat. He was intent on thanking the president because he was so grateful to him. He was exultant. And I would say, most importantly, he was intent on not playing the victim. He was grateful for all that had happened on his behalf, and he expressed that at the news conference to President Trump.
You know, we're all curious what exactly did happen on his behalf. Your plane arrives in Moscow yesterday. You're on the ground for a time. How did this come together? And did you personally meet with Vladimir Putin to help bring this about?
Well, I don't want to discuss the meetings that happened in Moscow. I would only say this. A few days ago, we were approached by someone, and we felt that we could get Mark Fogel home. We spoke to the president about it. That's top of the list for our president. Top of the list is that no Americans are left behind. They're all brought home. We fight for every one of them. And he gave me instructions, and I flew over there, and thank God we had a good result.
Can you say if you met with Vladimir Putin?
I just don't want to comment about that. I think today, this morning, should be much about Mark Fogel, his reuniting with his wife and talking to his mom on the phone. All of these conversations I heard last night, him letting the president know when he got here last night how grateful he was that he never thought it would happen for him. Every day he woke up in the morning hoping something like this would happen, and finally it did. And as the president said, it took the president 2.5 weeks to effect this. And it's testimony to him, how he operates, how focused he is on the goals that he espouses. And here is a great result. And then on top of that, maybe it's going to lead to a lot of wonderful things between him and President Putin in the future.
He also, Mr. Witkoff, called you dynamic and said you were very involved in this deal too. So bravo and congratulations to you as well. But we want to turn to the Middle East. President Trump has said this, that if all the hostages...
Guys, is Ukraine cooked? Ukraine has been cooked. Ukraine been cooked. When was Ukraine not cooked? It's coming to a close in terms of how cooked they are.
Saturday at noon, all hell is...
Like, what is let's say Biden wins another term, okay, in an alternative universe, or Kamala Harris wins another term, or Kamala Harris wins the election, okay? What's the alternative? Like, what's the alternative there? I don't see this going a very different way, in my opinion. Israel likely to strike Iran in coming months, warns U.S. intelligence, the Washington Post. Yeah. Instead of Donald Trump openly saying, yeah, we're committed to protecting Ukraine. Also, give us all your natural resources. The Biden administration continues by way of the Ukrainian government doing this. The privatization, the rampant privatization of Ukrainian natural resources and Ukrainian extraction being shipped off or being sold off to Western coalition partners. Okay, but they just don't actively say, like, we're doing it. We're doing it, Jack. The reason why I'm saying that there's an inevitability to this is because, and that is, those terms are dictated by the battlefield, is because either Biden or Trump was going to push for Ukraine to, and our European allies to forcibly deport Ukrainian men from inside of their national boundaries to go back to Ukraine on a one-way ticket, only to be immediately conscripted to go fight to defend Ukraine, while simultaneously forcibly constricting younger and younger people and potentially eating away at their entire young male labor force as we keep shipping weapons into Ukraine slowly. Okay. Or a similar outcome would occur no matter who the president is.
Going to break loose. That's a quote. It's been my experience, all hell breaking loose is never a good thing. What exactly does he mean by those words? We all know the phrase. And does it involve U.S. military, do you think? Or could it involve U.S. military?
Well, I don't want to get into the tactics, but I would take President Trump at his word. He generally means what he says. I would describe generally as 99.9% of the time. So I don't think it's a tactic. I think that what he's saying is that that Hamas's acts here have been completely irresponsible, reprehensible, that it didn't need to happen, it's not going to be tolerated, and that he's given conditions. And if they adhere to those conditions, then Sunday will be a better day for them. And if they don't...
That's crazy. I wonder if Gail will turn around and be like, well, we have New York Times reporting and Israeli media reporting that Hamas was abiding by the conditions set forth in the ceasefire negotiations, and it was actually Israel that wasn't following the agreement that you played a role in forcing Israel to abide by. I wonder if they'll say that. We'll see. We'll see. Come on, Stevie boy.
Don't adhere to those conditions, then it won't.
Mr. Witkoff, as we look at these images of Gaza, let's talk about some of those words by President.
Never mind. They just moved on from that take. Okay. Like, what you are reporting to us, Mr. Witkoff, is actually the exact opposite of what the media has reported in terms of who is not abiding by the ceasefire negotiation. Are you telling us that there is something different that you know about that the Israeli media has not reported on?
President Trump, yesterday, he said that by U.S. authority, it would take over Gaza. How would that actually work, and what authority does the U.S. have over that region?
Well, first of all, I think that what he's saying, and I think it gets misinterpreted at times, what he's saying is that there ought to be a better life and a better prospect for the Palestinian people. That living in Gaza today does not fulfill the humanitarian equation. It is a very, very difficult place to survive. There's 30,000 unexploded projectiles that are throughout the area of Gaza. There are dangerous conditions all over the place. There's been estimates as to how long it would take to rebuild. I think there's general acknowledgement that it's no less than 10 years, and it's probably closer to 15 to 20 years. So the president's objective here is to have long-term peace. And we're going to have long-term peace if there's long-term opportunity and wonderful prospects for the Palestinians.
How'd those bombs get there? I guess they were just growing on the ground. Or maybe Hamas had access to B-39s or whatever they're called, the Boeing bombs. They just intercepted them and then dumped it on themselves, I think.
Palestinian people to live in a better way, not to be afflicted by violence, for their children to grow up and get educated and have great economic prospects. And that doesn't occur in an environment like Gaza, where we just keep on reinventing the wheel and doing the same thing over and over again. Maybe it's time for new ideas, and that's what he's challenging me and everybody else.
Thank you for correcting me. I forgot what it was called. I forgot what the Boeing missiles were.
working on this to think about.
Yeah, we appreciate you. We have to get going. I wish I could follow up on that, but thank you for joining us.
Thanks for your work, Mr. Witkoff.
Okay. My pleasure. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. Have a good one.
In Germany, Democrats lost because they tried to run a woman. Americans are sexist as fucks. Yeah, no, that's not the case. The more center-right parties capitulate to far-right positions on immigration, okay, while simultaneously maintaining an austerity regime and not fixing the social safety nets and improving material conditions for the existing labor force in the country, the more the public goes, okay, so I guess like these are the anti-immigrant guys. Why the f should I go with this party now? I'm going to go with the anti-immigrant guys who have been right about immigration all along. That's just how it works. It makes sense if you're not paying a lot of close attention to politics in general. And many people don't. Yeah. Also, reform is on top of the charts right now. Like something that I warned about in the immediate aftermath of the predictable labor victory. I said that this would be a massive issue, and it's already occurring. The multi-party systems allow for smaller far-right groups to grow quickly as the extreme side of conservatism, like an escape. Yeah, reform is a rebrand of UKIP. That was a rebrand of BNP. Growing quickly is easy to do from nothing to a few seats, but they will never directly rule. Yeah, they will never directly rule until they are the ruling party. That's usually how it works. It also rarely ever goes in the opposite direction. It never goes for like communist parties growing. I wonder why. Perhaps because the parties that are in power, neoliberal parties, fear and refuse to cave or capitulate to left-wing parties out of the fear that leftist parties, communist parties, socialist parties are far more disruptive to the pre-existing hierarchy where big business still thrives than the Nazi parties are, than the fascist parties are. It is who the domineering parties cave to that actually stand to win the most. And if they consistently cave and consistently capitulate to the far-right parties, then people go, okay, well, these guys, we want to shake things up. The system is in a dire situation. Okay? The system is fundamentally broken. We want someone to shake things up. These guys have basically been signaling to the broader population that that the far-right parties are correct on their attitude towards immigration. So maybe we'll go there. Like, you know what this reminds me of? The huge demonstrations in Berlin. The anti-AFD demonstrations in Berlin. You know what this reminds me of? Women's March 2016. Look where that got us.
50,000 people have gathered in Berlin to call on Germany's other political parties not to cooperate with the...
Like, we did this too, chatter. That's why I'm saying Europe is just basically following America's footsteps, just like almost a decade later. Okay? You are so wrong, Lamau. It's hilarious. I wrote to you on Discord a week ago offering German perspective, but I get that there's a lot of shit going on in the U.S. right now. We have more than the Democratic Party. I get that you are fucking angry about that, but many countries here do not have a two-party system. Okay. Western liberal democracies that have a multi-party structure still inevitably go back to the same left-right dynamics by building coalitions. Okay? That this creates an additional safeguard, right? So it's not just like either you're all in on the Democrats or all in on the Republicans. And yet, when the party that is the dominating party is considering socialist and communist parties to be a non-starter, then they inevitably create that left-right coalition on the boundaries of, at the very most, a far-right neoliberal administration, or a far-right or very right-wing, much more right-wing neoliberal administration that inevitably makes way for the far-right to come in and actually, quote-unquote, change the system, change the dynamic. That's it. Having multiple parties simply forces the hand of the government to create a governing coalition. Also, we had a little thing called the Holocaust that changed our dynamic. I know, that's why it's even scarier that after the Holocaust, Germany is still entertaining fascism with 22% popularity. That's fucking insane. That makes it way more insane. That's the point. Also, I mean, look at the current governing parties and the way that they rage bait. What do you mean? That's not rage bait. Look at the current governing parties in Germany and how they've dealt with the issue of popular mobilization against the unlimited loyalty to Israel. This is just a loop until we actually get stuck with uninspiring centrists refuse to tackle the underlying social problems that lead to the rise of the far right. Stagnating living standards creates fertile ground for fascism. Far-right win elections. Far-right drives the economy off a cliff, lowers standards of public life, and generally makes everything objectively worse. Uninspiring centrist defeats the far-right with a promise of change. And then, boom, back to uninspiring centrist refuses to tackle underlying social problems that lead to the rise of the far-right. The thing that this actually does not mention, this cycle does not mention, is that there is a nefarious purpose for this song and dance. And that nefarious purpose is to undermine the existing welfare state slowly but surely, and then privatize as profit, as areas that you can eke out profits become smaller and smaller. You inevitably look to pre-existing publicly controlled sectors to eat away from. And you can't go in and destroy it overnight. That would cause a lot of anger and resentment towards the government. There would be a popular uprising. So what you have to do is, for decades and decades and decades, undermine the social safety nets that causes this resentment and anger to begin with, okay? And then slowly but surely privatize those social safety nets, the government-funded programs, transportation, healthcare, education. It can't happen overnight. People obviously care about these programs. It's just like in America, what do we have in terms of social safety nets? What do we have? Social Security. The Republicans have fantasized about gutting Social Security for literally a century, since its inception. Okay? They can't do it immediately. They can't do it overnight. They can simply cripple it for years and years and years and years until it gets to a point where you're like, well, it's bankrupt. We gotta pick it apart. Social Security is like the last bastion of competent social safety nets here in the United States. Look at what the current Republican administration is doing while they're cutting, while they're doing fiscal austerity, while they're doing fiscal responsibility politics. They're cutting food stamps. That's what they're doing. Social Security and the existing government-funded healthcare is next. Recently, the CDU worked together with the AfD, and that's why the people are protesting. So this chatter saying it won't happen in Germany, like in the U.S., is just wrong. Yeah. Yeah, they're stealing funds from FEMA at a time when you know, climate change is ripping through the United States of America.
Just as the Ukraine war approaches its third anniversary, a bombshell move from Donald Trump. calling Vladimir Putin to arrange talks and instructing his defense secretary to give a speech that has major implications not just for Ukraine, but also for the whole of NATO. The NATO alliance has guaranteed European security for almost 80 years, since 1949. And essential to all that has been America's support. Now, for the first time, that is in some doubt. NATO may have expanded, numbering 32 members now, including Sweden and Finland. But the US is still by far its most important member. America has more than 100,000 military personnel deployed in Europe, has air bases, intelligence bases, and naval assets all stationed here. Donald Trump has been pointing out for years that America spends vast amounts more on defense than any other nation.
What do you see as the solution to breaking the aforementioned cycle of centrism, right-wing politics? A competent labor party in this country, backed by a militant labor movement? That's the only way out of it for every country. What has happened historically must happen again. The only problem is there is no USSR this time around in the build-up to Nazi Germany. Like, we've never, I don't know what happens in this process, because there is never, at least historically, there has not been like, Germany was not the nuclear hegemonic superpower when World War II happened. Now imagine Germany, but instead it's the United States of America with a complex web of security partnerships and allegiances all around the globe, 800 military bases all around the globe, nuclear arms, and they're turning fascist with no USSR. At most you have China, but China has been more interested in self-preservation and is not shy. I mean, I guess the USSR wasn't shy of making allegiances with fascist movements initially as well, but we'll see what happens.
NATO nation, as you can see here, more than all the other NATO nations put together, with the UK now falling behind Germany into third place. But when viewed as a fraction of GDP defence spending, it looks a bit different. Poland is in the lead, then Estonia, and then America, a flatter line. Now, NATO is thinking of raising its...
Wow. Militant socialist movement. Italy did have one, and we had far more problems in the left in moments that the Brigitte Rossi started the bomb. But when it all stopped, we passed universal healthcare and public education. Militantism is never the way, and history shows that. I love that you're mentioning this as we are talking about NATO. What a fun time to bring up militancy in labor in a country like Italy. Right as we were talking about NATO. Seems very simplistic and not understanding of how multi-party systems work. Most of them will not exist in 10 years as the multi-party system provide the ability to have new perspective, have more ground, and older get away. The multi-party system is the best way to assure non-loyalty to a party, which is what was militantism. Without labor militancy, we would not have the fucking weekend, brother. What are you talking about? Do you like the weekend? Not the musical artist. I'm talking, the 2 days that you have off. We would not be able to abolish labor militancy is the reason for why we abolished child labor, which America is restoring in a very big way. Okay? Weren't several of those bombs attributed to socialists in Italy were actually done by NATO ex-Nazi terrorists? Wait a minute. What? Yes, that's the reason why I was laughing when what that chatter was representing as like labor militancy in Italy was actually just Operation Gladio. It's also funny to say fascism will never rise in Europe or in Italy when you got a literal fucking fascist in power right now.
Guidelines for defense spending from 2% to 3%.
Neoliberals or those in positions of power will never cave to demands made that are objectively pro-worker unless they are forced to. This is the same in the United States of America as well. FDR was not a socialist. He was not a communist. Okay? FDR was at least smart enough to recognize that the only way to stop a full-blown revolution from occurring in the United States of America was if he extended the capitalist state by offering a lifeline in the form of welfare and the New Deal. He listened to the socialists and the communists. He caved to their demands. And the only reason why he caved to their demands was not because of his socialist streak or whatever, but because He recognized that that was a necessity at the time, and it was due to labor militancy.
Now, that still leaves it well short of what Russia is spending, almost 7% of its GDP, so Putin can fight his war in Ukraine. US Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says Europe must do more to secure itself, and America has other things to focus on, causing concern about America's commitment to the alliance. But it's what he says about Ukraine that's caused the most alarm in the West, even if Russia is probably delighted.
When he says that if there's a peace deal, there won't be any American involvement in keeping the peace in Ukraine, and it must not be anything to do with NATO, I think that's going to have people in Brussels, somewhat alarmed. Fundamentally, I think this kind of a line will go down extremely well in the Kremlin, because what it says is right up front, before any negotiation, we're ready to go along with the idea that Russia can help itself to part of next door Ukraine's sovereign territory.
So even before any negotiations start, the Trump administration seems to be ceding ground to Vladimir Putin. After 3 years of war, it says Ukraine must give up the dream of getting all its land back to the borders it had in 2014. Since then, Ukraine has lost around 20% of its territory, Crimea and much of the east. And what Hegseth says about a possible peacekeeping deterrent force along the front line here in blue will also delight Vladimir Putin. Unlike other peacekeeping operations in the past, like this one in Kosovo in the late 90s, this will not be a NATO mission, Hegseth says. It also won't have any American troops in it. And any forces that do take part should not have NATO protection, he says. Now, that will make any government, including Britain's, think long and hard before sending troops to deter Russia from starting the war up again in a few years' time. So the stage is being set. Russia and America are initiating talks about Ukraine. Ukraine was only notified afterwards. The US is giving Vladimir Putin some of what he wants before talks have even begun. Events are moving fast at a pace set by Washington and Moscow, it seems, with allies, including Britain, struggling to keep up.